sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And we've got some stuff that's kind of popping right now. We had at least a few of those docs in the court files unsealed, and one of those being the prosecution's witness list. And I think that's going to help us quite a bit in determining some things that has been very difficult for us to determine up to this point. But sticking with what I had in mind is I'm going to do it's going to be a series because it's too much to go through in one video. But as I went through all the MPD docs, one thing was very clear is I was able to actually identify the police reports that Brett Payne had written the original probable cause affidavit from to arrest Bryan Kohberger. It wasn't just one probable cause affidavit, as Brett Payne testified to in court. Still early. That was like a living document that they just kept adding things to as time went on, and you can absolutely see how that happened. There's about 5 or 6 different police reports that the probable cause affidavit is taken word for word from. But what I find interesting in this case where they bring one person to trial, or try to, Bryan Kohberger, it's very interesting how Brett Payne goes through and picks and chooses the words that he wanted to use in that probable cause affidavit to arrest Bryan Kohberger, and what he didn't choose to include in that from the police reports that he used. And it's no doubt he used these specific police reports because he takes the stuff out of it word for word. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the first report, which is the first just couple of paragraphs of the probable cause affidavit. And this police report, he goes through and cherry picks what he wants to put in there for Bryan Kohberger, but it's what he doesn't put in there that I think really tells the story. What he doesn't put in there are things that wouldn't have helped with the probable cause, getting the warrant for Bryan Kohberger's arrest. So we're going to take a look at that one first, and then I'll go through each one of those reports and show you how the probable cause was built from those reports, what he chose to put in there from the reports and what he chose not to. Before I get into that though, I have to debunk myself. In the video that I did the other night, I went through and there was a couple of portions of that video where I was contemplating, like for example, was that Brent Kopacka's phone and was that Mawich's phone with Lena Black? And so I went ahead and went through every single ISP report again, trying to identify who could those phones have been. 2 things I know for certain. One, I know who the phone was, or I can show you who the phone was. It wasn't Brent Kopacka's phone on December 14th, which leaves the question, we know that they unalived Kopacka on the 14th, and we know they got his phone. There is not a report anywhere that says that they extracted Kopacka's phone. We heard in the news that, his phone was wiped clear, but they would have at least extracted it, right? If they were doing a serious investigation looking into Kopacka, he was named as a suspect, it said in tips earlier in the investigation. So it's what I'm not finding in these police reports that's very striking. So I did find the one, though, that they took the phone from on the 14th. What I didn't find was any police report of who they took the phone from on the 15th, which leads me to believe I was correct, and that was Lena Black, and that was Mawich's phone. So, and very, very strange. I'll make this point because we've seen in news reports, and I've showed you these news reports, like for example, a interview with Detective Gilbertson, where he said during the investigation, clearly, they looked into the victims and their friends first, and then they went into investigating the victims' families. I haven't seen, because that now I know that phone was not Kara Kernodle's that was extracted. That was the only police report I could find where they would have done any kind of investigating into Kernodle, other than the initial interview they did with her up in Coeur d'Alene when she was in jail. And she said, looked to me like this better not be because of my snitching activities. But there isn't any police reports in this entire case that shows any type of investigation into the parents. You've got to be kidding me. Is that just what they haven't showed us? Because how could you not look into the parents and you don't know what the motive is in this case? Yeah, right. There's a lot of things that are missing. First, let me show you that that verification that I was wrong on the Brent Kopaka phone. Then we're going to get into the first portion of what Brett Payne used to build the probable cause affidavit, and more importantly, what he didn't put in there, and see what it tells us. Let's hold on to your hats, folks. Okay, so first of all, I showed you this doc, and I showed how it was strange on the dates that they were doing this December 14th phone extraction, and FBI Travis Shirley, and it looked to me like either Kara Kernodle, or then I said, well, it could have been somebody signing off on Kopaka's phone because it was the day that they killed Kopaka. But after going through all the ISP docs, I think this is the most likely phone was returned to. It's somebody with a B and a, what's the odds? Somebody with a C and a K name that is, I guess, likely one of the students, and I don't know who it is because it says that they were named as a suspect on TikTok. But check this out. When I go to this interview on December 14th in the ISP docs, and it talks about Special Agent Travis Shirley, so this is no doubt the right one. ISP Detective Bryan O'Hara conducted an interview with this person, date of birth 2000. The interview was conducted at the MPD and had been reported through multiple calls and emails to the FBI tip line. Tip suggested the following: that he had owned a 2011 to 19 Hyundai Elantra. You can bet that's what it said. He knew the victims. He deactivated his social media accounts following the release of the description of the video. He described himself as a clinical sociopath in a TikTok video. He was at the Corner Club the night before the unalivings, and he was walking in the area of 1122 King Street. So that's what was all reported in the tips. When they interview him, though, he refutes a lot of this. Following is a summary of the interview. He works at something in Moscow. He lives in Moscow. He belongs to a fraternity pledged in the spring of 2020. He was in a class with Xana and Maddie. He did not know Xana and Maddie personally. He followed Maddie on Instagram. He has been to something out of house near 1122 King Street a handful of times. He was at the Corner Club the night of November 12th. He arrived between 7 and 8 with his roommate and girlfriend. Okay, he owns a something. He does not own or have access to an Elantra. The TikTok post about being a clinical sociopath was a joke. He does not believe he should be diagnosed with any sort of mental disorder. He agreed to a buccal swab for a DNA sample, signed a consent form to have his phone downloaded. Special Agent Shirley used the sterile swab to get the buccal swab. The interview concluded at 10:01. He took the phone and the consent form to MPD Lawrence Mowry. Mowry downloaded the phone, and I returned it to download of the phone right here on December 14th, Special Agent Travis Shirley. So I think I've solved my own mystery that I created here. And right here, I haven't solved anything, but I know it was this person's phone on December 14th, Travis Shirley, Lawrence Mowry. So whoever this CK is the one whose phone was extracted, and it was just somebody that was at the Corner Club, born in 2000, and they apparently got their buccal swab and eliminated them as a suspect. So this one probably didn't lead to Mowich. Yeah, I'm guessing. But I wanted to clear that up. I debunked my own theory here. And that's why I go, dang it. I look at the new list of prosecution witnesses, and I was hoping their list would kind of narrow down some of these initials. But when I go to their list and I go to K, I got Quinn Kelly. Now, that could look like a CK, but we know Quinn didn't live in Moscow. That's the only one that would even come close to looking like a CK. So as much as I thought this list was going to help us, it's not going to help us that much, I guess. Anyway, back to what I was talking about, and that is how this probable cause affidavit for Bryan Kohberger was actually built over time. And this is the statement of Brett Payne in Exhibit A. And, he starts out with, Brett Payne, duly appointed officer, Moscow Police Department a corporal, trained and qualified peace officer. And he's worked with, assisted by ISP, agents of the FBI. But on November 13th at 4 p.m., MPD Sergeant Blaker and I responded to King Road, hereafter the King Road residence, to assist with scene security and processing of a scene associated with the 4 unalivings. And then he goes on to talk about how Officer Smith, one of the initial responding officers to the incident, advised he would walk me through the scene. And we still haven't seen Payne's body cam, right? Or Blaker's. But then it starts with Officer Smith and I entered the King Road residence through the bottom floor on the north side of the building. Okay, so I want to show you the police report that this whole first section right here was taken from, and then we're going to look at how he just kind of cherry picked what he put in this and what he didn't put in this from that police report, and I think it's interesting. So when we go to this report written by Brett Payne on December 4th, and it's talking about the Blaker and Payne walkthrough. At approximately 4 o'clock on 11/13, Blaker and I responded to assist with scene security and processing. Upon my arrival, it's what is not in here, though, that's interesting. You can see Officer Smith, one of the initial responding officers to the incident, advised he'd walk me through the scene. So it's word for word out of this report. But the highlighted portion is only what made it into that first section of the probable cause affidavit. Officer Smith and I entered the building at 1122 King Road through the bottom floor on the north side of the building. And it skips right to Officer Smith and I then walked upstairs to the second floor. So when you look at the probable cause affidavit, Smith and I entered the building on the bottom floor of the north side of the building. Smith and I then walked upstairs to the second floor. So it just jumps right to that from this report. What he leaves out is everything that happened when he was on the first floor. And it is telling, and I know we've covered this before, but I'm going to do it again because it answers questions I brought up myself. Upon entering, I observed a small bedroom on the west side of the bottom floor. Now, that's going to be the bedroom to the right when you walk in the door, the one that we were unsure of. The door was ajar, and I could see a bed with covers and several other personal miscellaneous items strewn about. The room did not appear to have been occupied by anyone, as I did not see any clothes inside. So this is discussing the room that I was unsure of was either Bethany's or the extra room. I guess the way we could look at it now, though, was Blaker during that interview with Bethany asking her what room was hers or what room she was in during this time. But that's a side point. He then followed Smith down the hall where there was a small bedroom. Next to the small bathroom to the east was what I later learned was a utility closet. This closet had a pin code style lock and was secured. I looked into the bedroom on the east end of the bottom floor, which I later learned belonged to Bethany Funk. The room had normal clothes and personal items about, but otherwise did not seem out of the ordinary. So he left all of this, of what he noticed on the bottom floor, out of the probable cause affidavit. Why? Because the probable cause affidavit was simply to arrest Bryan Kohberger. Now, what is the story around what they say Bryan Kohberger did? Well, Bryan Kohberger, they say, came in through the back door on the second floor, goes upstairs, unalives two, comes downstairs, unalives two, and then walks back out the back door on the second floor. So they wouldn't want to even mention in the arrest warrant for Kohberger anything about that first floor, which is why Ann Taylor was making the statements, in court, how much that they left out that the magistrate didn't know when she issued the arrest warrant for Kohberger. But something else that I've discovered because of all of this deep diving into which room was Bethany's is we actually have pictures of Bethany's room, y'all. Okay, we go to this report by Hugh Powell, and he says that he returned to the home on December 3rd, and he was taking pictures of items of evidence, right? And what he tells us right here is the empty Keystone light can in the stairway between the first and second floor, the black Jansport backpack located on the living room floor on the second floor, empty Keystone light can located on top of the vanity along the south wall on the first floor east bedroom. Well, if the east bedroom on the first floor is Bethany's, then we now have pictures inside Bethany's room, and we had them the whole time. Okay, so right here is going to be pictures taken from the first floor east bedroom. So this is Bethany's room. So when we look at these pictures, this is what it looks like in Bethany's room. This is her little desk, and this is all of her alcohol and what are these, vitamins? So jewelry, this is Bethany's room. Here's her laundry. So these are all of her necklaces and stuff, her Keystone light cans. So what can we see in this? Look, here's her bed. I guess they're doing shotguns. Who shotguns a White Claw? Good grief. I'm not so sure why they wanted to go back and take pictures of these Keystone light cans. Why were they really wanting that? Okay, so look, here's on December 3rd, here's what Bethany's bed looks like. We got jackets and boxes. Sheet barely covers the mattress topper there. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. And here's the Keystone light can that they wanted photographed. So this must be Bethany's closet. She had little bitty feet. And then they wanted to photograph her White Claws for some reason. But that's interesting. So that's Bethany's room. Okay, so another stupid mystery that shouldn't have been a mystery solved there. We know which room, without a doubt, is now Bethany's room. So, again, going back to the PCA, all that stuff we had read in there, it skipped right to, we walked to the second floor. And then it goes to Officer Smith directing me down the hallway to the west bedroom on the second floor, which I later learned through Xana's driver's license and other personal belongings found in the room was Xana Kernodle's, hereafter Kernodle's room. Now, what actually does it say in the report? Officer Smith and I then walked upstairs to the second floor. They directed me down the hallway. Here's where he took it word for word out of the room, but he left out the stairs ended in a small living room. There was a sectional style couch along the east and south wall of the living room. There was also a small TV in a void on the northeast corner of the room. I also saw a black backpack on the floor just east of the top of the stairs. Okay, so that probably wasn't relevant to put in there anyways. Okay, as I approached the room, I could see a body later identified as Kernodle's laying on the floor. As I approached the room, I could see a body later identified as Kernodle's laying on the floor. Kernodle was deceased with wounds which appeared to have been caused by an edged weapon. All right, so Kernodle, so before he jumps over to which appeared to be caused by an edged weapon, he leaves out Kernodle was lying on her back with her feet facing the east and her head was facing the west. Kernodle had thong-type underwear on and a gray sweatshirt. There was a large amount of blood on the floor around Kernodle as well. I could see numerous wounds on Kernodle's arms, hands, and face. Just next to Kernodle on the west wall was a small white nightstand, which appeared to have been moved as it was pushed against the wall at an odd angle. There was blood on this nightstand in various locations. So he left out a lot of the gory details on this one, it looks like, plus the position of where Kernodle was laying. And I think that was an important thing to leave out because he wouldn't have wanted everybody to know exactly where they found Kernodle and how she was laying. She was obviously in the bedroom. So this wasn't something that took place outside of the bedroom. It's something that took place in her bedroom. In the bed in Kernodle's room was situated on the south wall of the bedroom with the head of the bed appearing to be towards the west wall. I could see a male later identified as Ethan Chapin. So we go back to the PCA. After Kernodle was deceased with wounds caused by an edged weapon. Also in the room was a male later identified as Ethan Chapin. And then he goes to, and this isn't in that report, Chapin was also deceased with wounds later determined by Vina Singh, the county medical examiner, on December 15th, which always threw us for a loop. Why'd they wait till December 15th to get the autopsy back from Ethan? And why was his different than everybody else's? To be caused by sharp force injuries. Now, that wasn't in that report. He added that. The only thing that was in that report was also in the room was Ethan. I could see a male later identified as Ethan Chapin. He left out all of this, though. Laying on his back in the bed with some type of blanket pulled over his midsection. Chapin's body was at an angle on the bed so that his head was up against the south wall and his feet were hanging off the bed on the north side. I could not clearly see the wounds to Chapin's head and neck area. So he didn't just have subclavian vein lacerations on his neck area. He's also got wounds to his head, but could see a very large amount of blood on the bed as well as what appeared to be blood spatter on the wall next to Chapin's head and neck. I also noticed 2 large cuts to the back of Chapin's legs. The wounds appeared to be deep into the tissue, but were difficult to see due to Ethan's body position. So this wasn't just slash Ethan's neck and he's unalived and take care of Xana and then go back and carve on Ethan's legs. Now, he's got injuries to his head. He's got spatter on the wall. He's got neck area injuries, cuts on the back of his legs. This is why the defense expert said that obviously those two were attacked at the same time. And then it says Officer Smith then took me through the house and pointed out Dylan Mortenson's bedroom, which was situated on the southeast side of the second floor of the house. Mortenson's bedroom door opened to the kitchen area as well as the staircase, which led to the third floor of the house. Upon my brief visual inspection, Mortenson's room was disheveled, but did not appear to have any blood or evidence of a struggle within. All right, so none of this made it into the probable cause affidavit. He skips right to, I then followed Officer Smith upstairs to the third floor of the residence. I then followed Officer Smith upstairs to the third floor of the residence. The third floor consisted of 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. I followed Smith to the third floor of the residence. Third floor consisted, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. So that was right out of there. The bedroom was on the west side of the floor, was later determined to be Kaylee Gonzalez's room. Okay, the bedroom west side of the floor was later determined to be Kaylee Gonzalez's room. I later learned from review of Officer Nunez body camera, there was a dog in the room. So this portion right here wasn't in there. He's adding this from watching Nunez's body cam later. All right, this room appeared to be neat and picked up. This is what he left out. The only thing of note was the sheets on the bed were pulled back in a manner which suggested someone had been laying in the bed and then gotten out of it. So that is interesting that in Kaylee's bed, it did look like somebody had laid down and got out of Kaylee's bed at some point. And then it goes to the next portion. Officer Smith then pointed out a small bathroom on the east side This bathroom shared a wall with Mogan's bedroom. I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. All right, so he left out the Jack decor and the dog. So he's pointed out a bathroom. I could see Mogan's bedroom, which was on the corner of the floor. I could see 2 females in a single bed in the room. Both Mogan and Gonzalez were deceased with visible stab wounds. I later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogan's right side when viewed from the door. What did he leave out of that? Okay, so they were laying on their backs with their heads towards the east and their feet towards the west, which was also the direction of the only door in the room. It talks about visible stab wounds. They were covered in a significant amount of blood. I remained in the room for a moment and then proceeded back outside. I later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath on the board. Yeah. And then he remained on the scene, conducted several more walkthroughs of the scene with ISP forensic team, Latah County coroner, and Latah County prosecutor. Yeah, so we got Mabbitt and Thompson in there with you, and y'all are walking through. Upon receipt of the search warrant prepared by Officer Nunez, the ISP forensic team lead by Detective Sergeant Gilbertson processed the scene, and collected an initial 56 pieces of evidence. The ISP turned these items over to me that evening. I transported them to the MPD temporary evidence storage. And then the next morning, I booked these items into evidence. So there's chain of custody on the sheath overnight. Nobody knows where it was. But this is all the first report that was used to create the first paragraph or 2 of the probable cause affidavit. And what you're going to find as we go through these reports, what they don't put in here is very interesting. So that'll be the first portion of it. Now, as we get into the next police reports that make up the rest of that probable cause affidavit, that's where things become really, really interesting. And, you know, it's my belief that unless you can understand as much as you possibly can about this case, then getting to the truth is going to be way too hard to achieve. And I have to be able to understand this thing inside and out from 20 different ways. And then I make these videos to help you understand as well, but also to help me learn what it is I need to learn about each particular part. And by doing that, you know, we bring up things and we can either vet them out as true or we can exclude them as false. I mean, that's the only way I know of to finally get to the truth. For example, I got a police report wrong because all I had is C and K as initials on when a phone's downloaded. It forced me to go through and try to find a correlating report and debunk my own theory, and I did. But it also forced me to go through and try to verify the other phone that was downloaded, and there wasn't a report, which tells me a lot. And then the first floor, which room is Bethany's? I mean, that's been driving me crazy, and I knew I'd seen in reports saying that was her room on the east, but listening to their mouths, it was saying it was on the west. Well, now we know it was on the east because we got pictures of her room, and if it wasn't for me going through with those questions, I would have never figured that out. Now that we've got these released court docs that the judge has sealed, like 4 more docs out of 1,200. Thank you, Judge. And the one he didn't unseal is the one I wanted to see. Ridiculous. But I'm going to go ahead and put a video together going over those unsealed docs because there is some interesting things in there as well. But in the meantime, please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Until next time, Pavarotti's out.
It's the first time of today.